hello everybody. Good morning to you all. As you can see, I'm here in sunny San Francisco. Not actually sunny at this time in the morning, but thank goodness for virtual backgrounds on Zoom. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you. I'm here representing Couchbase. We consider ourselves to be the leading enterprise class multi-cloud to edge NoSQL database. That's a mouthful, but I'll explain a little bit about what we mean by that. When we focus in on what's happening in the financial services industry, and specifically the role of digital transformation as it pertains to customer experience and customer engagement. And I think we're all here on a day when the world has been turned upside down by COVID-19. Being able to join you remotely and deliver a presentation to this very large audience, distributed as you no doubt are across multiple locations, is a testament to the dependency that we have in this modern age on digital technology. And the way that we are adapting and adjusting to this unprecedented situation is actually defining our competitive advantage or disadvantage. And I think we're all now reflecting very hard on what are the infrastructural investments that we've been making, how far have we come along the digital journey, and what yet do we still need to do to be able to satisfy the needs of our customers as they are now confronted with many different choices than they were previously. So what I wanted to do today was just briefly touch on some of those key requirements as we see them in the financial services industry, to look at what that means in terms of the solutions to allow for a modern application development environment to be developed. Then looked at some specific use cases for NoSQL. NoSQL is a misnomer in some sense, if in that it appears to imply that it is a contrast to SQL. Essentially the core of relational database technologies and the backbone of our banking and financial industries over the last several decades. But it's important to know that NoSQL was defined as not only SQL, so it's what happens beyond SQL. So we're going to talk about what's different about this versus what we have had in the past, and then take a look at solution architectures. What should you be looking for in a NoSQL platform to enable you to address the needs that you have for your application development environment moving forwards? And then I'll just wrap it up with a few words about Couchbase and some of our customers. So let's jump into digital transformation challenges in the financial services industry. And there are three that I wanted to pick out. And I think the first one really is thrown into sharp relief right here, right now, which is to say that the way in which our customers want to engage us has transformed into anywhere, anytime, anyhow. And the expectation that that drives is that all of the information that they are looking for will be available to them in real time through the aperture of their choice or channel of their choice. Extremely challenging to be able to bring together the diversity of services from ATMs through on trading platforms, through fraud detection services, through customer support and customer contact, but being able to bring that together in real time as the customer is engaged online or in person or over the phone. First thing, how do we create a customer 360 view and manage that effectively with the multiple data sources that we need to consider? The second is how we ensure that the performance that we deliver, the experience that we deliver, is first class at all times and under all circumstances, no matter what the demands that are being placed on the environment. And that issue of performance at scale is one of the key drivers for NoSQL in the first place. How do we manage to scale up and scale out cost effectively while delivering performance at scale is the second critical need. And that third piece here around always on. There is no interruption in a 24/7, 365 world. There's no ability for us to introduce maintenance windows. We can't afford to wait 6 weeks before we can bring a new capability into our environment. We need to be able to add new fields, new data sources, unstructured, semi-structured data on the fly, and be able to implement that live into our applications. That's an essential requirement because essentially that's what your competitors are doing. And if you're not doing it, you're behind, and your customers will notice and will make their own choices. The other piece of this is unpredictability of demand. The fact of the matter is none of us could have anticipated this, or perhaps Bill Gates is the exception to the rule, but most of us did not anticipate the incredible change that's happening in our environment just now, and the demand that that's placing on so many organizations that we're seeing buckling under the pressure of having to adjust and adapt. One of the beauties of NoSQL is its ability to scale limitlessly on demand. And of course, that depends on the architecture of the underlying platform, but I'll show you that it is possible to accomplish that and to do so in a wide variety of environments. So how do you handle unpredictable demand? How do you handle unpredictable changes in your business environment? That's really the key to building a modern application development environment, and that's what we're going to talk more about now. So what specifically is it that is required to accomplish the three things that we've just talked about? Well, I think it's worth just stepping back for a quick second and asking ourselves what's changed in terms of our customers' expectations over the last few years. And this picture is really, I think, indicative of the world in which we now live. If it's not an app that's accessible from a mobile device wherever we are, whenever we want to access it, then frankly, we're not using it. And so we're all competing for space on these very limited real estate devices that we carry around. And the value that we create through those applications is essentially the value that we create from our institutions as a whole. This is an example of multiple applications that all share one common characteristic, which is that in order for the organizations that are represented here to be able to service their customers, they all implemented NoSQL database solutions to accomplish that and to power these applications. So let's talk a little bit more about that. It goes without saying that to build a modern application development environment, we're talking about a cloud-based environment, but it's not solely a cloud-based environment. We need to be able to operate as if everything is in the cloud, even if it's not. So the ability to build hybrid environments and deliver an integrated data solution from the cloud through to the edge, first requirement. And that edge environment, the seamlessly mobile, is not just about having access to our data through our mobile devices. We can do that fairly straightforwardly. The critical question is, what happens when those devices are untethered or where there is intermittent connectivity? How do we ensure that we're replicating data and storing it locally on that device so that the experience is uninterrupted from the user's point of view? That concept of an embedded database synchronized back to a core server is one of the key challenges that the cloud service providers are failing to meet at this time, and one reason why their integrated database solutions are not necessarily fit for purpose for all of the applications that we're dealing with here. Built-in Smart speaks to this idea that we need to be able to bring AI and ML directly into the application. We need to be able to provide predictive analytics because we're dealing with real-time operational data. Where is our recommendation engine and how up-to-date is it able to be? So how do we deal with the analytics? How do we deal with operational dashboarding and bring those things into the applications that we're serving? I've touched on this issue of built for change at scale, but just think about, for example, your data schema or how your data models are built. Are you really able to scale limitlessly without having to go back and redo those models? Well, think about capabilities like auto sharding of data, the ability to not have to pre-plan where that data will be stored, how queries will work, how to optimize the performance of that is critically important and dependent on the underlying architecture. Speed naturally is critical, and security. We're talking about financial data, we're talking about regulated environments. So let's think deeply about what type of security we're able to bring for data that is at rest, data that is in flight, and right across the user-based user environment, i.e. role-based access to data and so forth and so on. So 6 key requirements here, and I would just add to that for financial services specifically. So the 6 I just referenced, you could apply pretty much to any application you want. But in the financial services industry specifically, some additional requirements here, and I mentioned it briefly around regulatory, that would be one of the most critical adds. But I would also add another one, which is the level of personalization that is delivered. How do we actually manage data separation to be compliant with GDPR, with data locality requirements and so forth and so on? So there's a need for us to be able to be extremely scalable, yet at the same time extremely customizable. And that is an extremely challenging thing to do, as we know, in our existing data environments. So some of the things that you should be looking for in platforms that you're considering for this purpose. The first thing I would suggest is this issue of scaling means that you should be thinking about scaling each of the data services that you're supporting on the platform independently. And you want to be able to do that in a way that does not limit you at all. And the reason that you want to think about scaling these data services independently is because their requirements on the underlying infrastructure are quite different. When we're talking about standard CRUD operations, very different from query and our ability to then perform analytics. And indexing, typically something that you want to create separation around. So can you do that in a very flexible manner using the architecture that you're considering. The second area I would ask you to think about is how you share and spread that data. One of the things that our customers tell us that is extremely important to them is this idea of active replication. This is not, you don't want a master-slave environment where there is negotiation for who actually owns the master copy of the data so that it can be replicated to others. You want to look for a very dynamic and resilient environment which allows you to share data across multiple locations and across multiple environments. Specifically, think about moving from on-premise into virtualized environments, containerized environments now, of course, all the way through into the public cloud. Can you actually manage data across those environments in a seamless way? Look for cross-data center replication technologies to help you do that. That should all be integrated, of course, into the core platform itself. So to spend a couple of minutes on the use cases, and then we're going to talk about the architectural dependencies underneath here. So some of the financial services use cases that NoSQL is used for, fraud detection and scoring is an obvious one. It requires real-time response. It requires it at massive scale. So there we are. That's one reason why NoSQL has immediately come into this. But actually, interestingly here, upsell and cross-sell is another key area. Recommendation engines, we've mentioned these already. These are a key application for NoSQL. The ability to be able to process the data fast enough to be able to bring a recommendation in the less than 30 milliseconds that your user is willing to wait for that updated information. So being able to respond in real time is what drives the requirements for that. I'll touch on another one here, which is mainframe offloading. In this dynamic growth environment where we have this explosion of data at scale, one of the biggest single issues is how on earth do we afford to scale out our systems and platforms to be able to do that? And one of the key limitations that we have, particularly in the financial services industry, is our dependency and continued dependency on mainframe for certain applications. And the way that we were able to solve that in a NoSQL context is typically by introducing a caching layer in front of that mainframe. And I'll share some customer examples in a minute here, but specifically the ability to be able to do two things simultaneously: reduce the cost of MIPS by essentially reducing the data processing load back into the mainframe itself. More and more can be handled within the caching layer. And secondly, by improving the performance, simply reducing the latency and ensuring that the customer experience is improved while reducing the cost of using the mainframe, without having to make any material change to the architecture of the applications themselves. So that's one of the key applications that you might want to think about as a starting point for introducing NoSQL into your environments if you're not already doing so. And so I thought it would be helpful to just talk about a couple of customers that we've worked with. One here, specifically Wells Fargo, was dealing with a number of different issues, but one specific problem that they were looking to solve here was in the area of fraud monitoring, something that they were dependent on their mainframe-based applications to do. And as you can see from the requirements here, they were looking to essentially modernize their application environment, improve performance and speed of response, as well as to scale out this application on a broad basis while replicating data for high availability and disaster recovery. And the benefit that they were able to drive here is that they were able to process all of their transactions, 100% of their transactions in real time. Previously, they were just at 18%. That was a huge delta for them. And you can see 50 million versus 4 million per day, while delivering very, very high performance. So transforming the customer experience in a meaningful way, while improving security for those same customers. The second example I'll give you is La Banque Postale, one of the largest banks over in Europe here. In this case, they were concerned to deliver a full customer 360 solution, but deliver it as a platform as a service. Effectively, they were running their own private cloud and being able to support multiple lines of business from an individual or from a single platform that they were able to manage for the bank as a whole, and to deliver a much higher performance, lower latency solution, as you can see. And in this case, they did exactly what I said earlier, which is they introduced the NoSQL platform initially for caching, but it evolved to become a single source of truth, and they're actually planning to take it all the way through to a system of record. So one of the interesting things about NoSQL is over the last couple of years, most NoSQL platform providers have actually started to introduce multi-document ACID transactions, something which has previously been very difficult to accomplish and typically was the decision point between moving to NoSQL or staying in a relational environment. That's one of the two key changes that have occurred. The second is, being able to support SQL natively or SQL compatible programming natively on the NoSQL platform. It sounds like a paradox, but or an oxymoron, but the ability to operate with SQL is helping organizations to adopt NoSQL because of the reduction of need to retrain their existing folks. So here's an example where Banque Postale was able to move from a mainframe-based environment into NoSQL successfully. And the issue of a flexible schema, I'll just come back to that point that I made earlier, which is this ability to be able to update and modernize applications on the fly without downtime, introducing new data fields, introducing new data sources, has been a really key value for this idea of sort of continuously innovating into the data pipeline without interruption or disruption from the user or the system's point of view. Just the last example I shared today is with SAP Concur, and I'm sharing this because mobile applications really are so crucial to the experience that we're delivering for our customers today. And in this particular instance, Concur had experimented with several different technologies in the NoSQL space, specifically Apache open source Cassandra, which is commercialized by DataStax, and MongoDB. What they found here was that it really was critical to look at the underlying architecture and understand how their applications would be supported in mobile devices. And in this particular instance, they found that they fell short of their expectations. And they made the choice to come to Couchbase for that. And a big part of that is because of the architecture that we have implemented here in our platform. So I'll just spend the last couple of minutes talking about solutions architectures and what you should be looking for from a NoSQL platform. This is a bit of an eye chart, but if you look at the bottom, what this represents really is, first of all, what type of infrastructure should you be looking for? And I would advocate that you should be looking for a platform that allows you to fulfill multiple functions that may be separated inside of your architecture today. For example, the ability to have an integrated cache is what gives you that performance enhancement and the ability to seamlessly move a NoSQL platform into your environment. Marry that then to a key value store, to a JSON document database, what we call a multimodal NoSQL database. That's going to give you the flexibility to apply the right tools to the right applications in the right way. But then add to that then a comprehensive querying and indexing capability. And I would advocate that you look for SQL compatible querying capability so that you can reuse the skills that already exist within your organization. But beyond that, think about analytics, think about full text search, think about eventing. These are things that, that we are used to from a relational environment, but are relatively new in the NoSQL world. And then add to that mobile, as we touched on already. And then think about the underlying infrastructure. Are you going to be able to run this in the cloud of your choice? Are you going to be able to move from Azure to GCP or from AWS to Azure at the time and place of your choosing? Can you operate this in a hybrid environment where you're still on-prem in some areas and you're moving to the cloud in others, and you want that data to be able to move seamlessly across those environments? So these are key considerations for your underlying NoSQL platform, and that will allow you then to implement NoSQL in ways that will be the least disruptive for your business. As I said already, if you think about caching and offloading mainframes to source of truth, and the ability to combine multiple sources of data together for your applications, all the way through to a full ACID compliant system of record. And then think about where you can apply that within your organization. We see multiple solution areas. I've talked a little bit about Customer 360, catalog and inventory in a very high SKU environment such as financial services. That has a large play. And then when we talk about the mobile applications here, the ability to do account management, investment tracking, etc., to deliver against the user expectation of accessing their information by whatever channel they choose. So NoSQL has broad application and allows for a transformed environment. A couple of other considerations, I've touched on it already, multidimensional scaling, I can't say it enough. The ability to be able to separate out these workloads allows you to define what type of application needs should be reflected into the underlying system. And the ability to manage that very flexibly, create workload isolation is going to be one of the keys to success. So I've said a lot. Let me just recap really quickly. NoSQL can help you and your organization today in a multiple different ways. The first is to enrich the customer experience and deliver that seamlessly through multiple channels. The second is to deliver that performance regardless of geography, regardless of time or device. The ability to provide consistency of performance is one of the keys to your success. The third is actually taking cost out of the business. And I think at this moment of time, there's probably no greater focus for a lot of organizations. How do we manage expenses while we get through this horrific COVID-19 situation? So one of the ways to do that, take cost out of your legacy infrastructure. The typical cost of a NoSQL solution is a fraction of what you're spending for your legacy environments today. So evaluate carefully, but that's one of the key areas. The next is around cross-sell and upsell. How can you expand your reach and your footprint within your customer environments? Clearly by bringing more of your services to bear to each of them appropriately with intelligence. Scaling infrastructure easily and without disruption. We talked about this idea of being able to change applications on the fly, and then high availability, the ability to manage in an environment where, regardless of the disaster scenario, you're going to be able to continue to ensure that the data is accurate and delivered to the right applications in the right places. So lastly, just to say thank you for the time today. Just to explain a little bit more about Couchbase. So we deliver a full stack data managed environment. We have Couchbase Server, which is our core NoSQL database, our sync gateway, which allows us then to manage millions of endpoints with embedded database, what we call Couchbase Lite, built on top of SQLite, actually, most popular embedded database in the world, with security end to end. This is a unique architecture from a NoSQL provider point of view. Most of our competitors focus on the right-hand side of this picture, which is the core server itself. But you should be thinking about the web tier. You should be thinking about the client end of this as well. As I mentioned already, we provide a multi-dimensional scaling environment, so I won't spend more time on that. But if we look at the platform as a whole, one of the keys to our success is that the underlying architecture itself is a shared nothing, asynchronous, elastic architecture built around this caching capability, gives us the ability to support this significant scaling while maintaining performance with auto sharding built in, which means consistent performance at any scale. It allows us to operate on a multi-cloud basis, deliver location and deployment agnostic solutions, and provide ease of programmability. I've mentioned already, but it is super important to note, SQL is a big deal. As we start to talk about more complex applications, business critical applications, we're looking for a platform which is commensurate to the legacy relational databases that we've been using. And we've been very, very focused and working with Don Chamberlain, co-author of SQL, to ensure that what we deliver in our platform is commensurate with what you are used to or your teams are used to. So just to finish up here, some of the customers we've talked about, here are some others which are we serve today. And I hope this has been a useful insight into what NoSQL can mean for you. And of course, we'd be delighted to continue that conversation after the session today. So with that, thank you so much for the time. I apologize for the difficulty of timing this morning, but I hope you got what you wanted from this presentation. Thank you again.